Kruti is doing a fellowship with Chandre. She's a graduate of Mysore Medical College, did her MD from Kempegowda Institute of Medical Sciences, DNB National Board Examination. She also completed postgraduate program in cardiology and rheumatology, Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, Baltimore. She's senior assistant Department of Medicine, Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai, and assistant professor Department of General Medicine, Yenapaya Medical College, Mangalore. Shruti Prakruti is the next speaker. She is presenting the case.
Thank you for the kind introduction, sir. Can I please share this screen?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Good morning, chairpersons and all the delegates. At the outset, I would like to thank our mentor, Dr. Chandrasekhar, for providing me with this opportunity. Today, I will be presenting an interesting case of complex interplay between infections and autoimmune disorders. First, a little background. The patient was a 30-year-old lady who's homemaker, presented with intermittent fever, polyarthritis, generalized lymphadenopathy, urticarial rash since 6 months prior to presentation at our center. She also had weight loss of about 15 kgs since 1 year before presentation to us, had on and off vomiting and nausea since 6 months, and she was married for 5 years with one child, with no events during pregnancy. She had no other significant past history or any drug allergies noted. She was evaluated for the same in multiple hospitals and was evaluated on the lines of suspected lymphoma. She had generalized lymphadenopathy on examination and was extensively evaluated. Most of the infections were ruled out, like leptospira, V. felix, and enteric fever, brucella, malaria. The point which was noted during with all the investigations that she had undergone was she had anemia with thrombocytopenia, and the lymph node from the cervical region, which was FNAC, was done for the same. That was not representative. And a cervical node biopsy again suggested a suspected Hodgkin's lymphoma. PET scan revealed that there was cervical intraparotid, suboccipital, mediastinal, and retroperitoneal lymphadenopathy, which is suggestive of lymphoma. There was also hepatosplenomegaly and diffuse marrow being metabolically active, but the SUV was not very high, which is typical of lymphoma, and hence they were reconsidering. There was no evidence to conclude that there was lymphoma. A protein electrophoresis again showed low albumin with polyclonal hypergammaglobulinemia. And at that point of time, a bone marrow aspiration was done, which showed normoblastic erythroid hyperplasia. There was no evidence of HLH. Fibrinogen level was higher, 784, and hypertriglyceridemia was also there. APLA workup was negative, and a bone marrow biopsy showed a reactive marrow. She was being evaluated further at our center. It was a little difficult to convince them to be patient and to get admitted in the hospital because of the long in and out of hospital stays that they already had been through. And the evaluation over here stretched over a period of a month. She presented somewhere around November last week. As we can see, during the evaluation, we also noted that she developed pancytopenia, apart from the bicytopenia which she previously had. And her inflammatory parameters were persistently fluctuating, with mostly being on the higher side. And ferritin was persistently high. We went ahead and evaluated her for other infections which were previously not considered, like CMV and EBV. And considering other autoimmune conditions, even though the ANA initial screen being negative, we did a profile which again turned out to be negative. Only her CMV IgG and IgG dengue was positive, suggesting only a previous infection. There was no growth in a urine culture or blood, and her ultrasound screening also suggested mild hepatosplenomegaly. Her D-dimer was a little on the higher side, that was 3,304. We went ahead and did an IHC of the cervical node, which was again not specifically representative of any particular etiology. It suggested reactive lymphadenitis. At this point of time, she was now admitted with us for persistent fever, which would not subside. So we went ahead and did her triglycerides, which was high, her NK cells, which were low. She now was fitting into the criteria of HLH, wherein almost 6 of the criteria like fever, splenomegaly, cytopenias, hypertriglyceridemia, and low NK cell activity with hyperferritinemia was noted. So we concluded with a diagnosis of hemophagocytic lymphohistiocytosis in about the first week of January 2020. She was started on cyclosporin 50 milligrams thrice a day, which was escalated to 100 milligrams twice a day, along with hydroxychloroquine and tapering dose of steroids. She was doing pretty well with above medications. And on follow-up, she was initiated on methotrexate 7.5 milligrams per week, which was escalated later to 25 milligrams per week in view of financial constraints for cyclosporin, and also the disease being stable about September 2020. Later, we gradually withdrew the cyclosporin and discontinued on 3rd of November 2020. Patient was doing better and was on regular follow-up with us. These are the comparison of investigations for when we concluded the HLHS diagnosis and for when we withdrew the cyclosporin. Now, on 21st of November, she presented to us with generalized body pain associated with chills intermittently. There was no fever. There was no other feature suggestive of any infection. We went ahead and did a routine infection screen. Her urine was normal, only a slightly higher WBC, which is 12,380. She was on steroids, so we took it with a pinch of salt. We did her LDH and ferritin. Apart from the CRP and ESR being high, which fluctuated throughout her course, there was no specific reason for us to believe that there was any infection at that point of time. This was her chest X-ray. So we concluded that it could be a disease flare, and more so because we had withdrew the cyclosporin. We thought that she is again having a flare. So we reinitiated cyclosporin and escalated the dose of steroids to 7.5 mg per day. Patient felt better after starting steroids and cyclosporin, and was on regular follow-up along with other medications. About 2 weeks later, on 3rd of December, she again presented to us with generalized weakness, nausea, vomiting, now with chills and fever, where the recorded temperature was about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So again, we did our routine investigations. Now the CRP and ESR had jumped. Ferritin was surprisingly on the normal side. LDH was also normal. But the WBC had jumped up to 20,330 with predominant neutrophils, which was about 91.4%. So we went ahead and did an X-ray, and we could appreciate that she has markedly increased bronchovesicular markings with suspicious shadows on both the sides, more on the right side. And as a part of routine screen for all admitted patients, we did a COVID IgG, which was positive. She did not complain of any COVID-like symptoms per se. And on probing, she said that there was mild throat pain the last time when I came. Apart from that, it was completely normal. So we went ahead and did HRCT, which suggested CORADS 1 type of lung involvement. However, her COVID RT-PCR was negative. These were the images of the HRCT. So we considered that the previous episode where we thought that it was because of the disease flare following withdrawal of cyclosporin, we now consider that it could be a COVID-induced flare. So initiated her on an antiviral treatment in view of the HRCT changes with favipiravir, 1800 milligrams stat followed by 800 milligrams twice a day for 7 days. Increased the steroids to up to 10 mg per day. We also initiated low molecular weight heparin in view of high D-dimer, and her DMRs were withheld except for the hydroxychloroquine. With that, she had significant improvement, and we went ahead and did a literature search to identify if there were any particular cases. And we found one particular review article which discussed about immunopathogenesis of coronavirus induced acute respiratory distress syndrome, which was a potential infection associated HLH. There, they specifically differentiated between COVID induced symptoms and compared them with HLH. However, here it was malignancy associated HLH that they were comparing. But as we could see that most of the things that we are considering for the diagnosis of HLH were also induced by COVID. So it was definitely a dicey situation wherein we were considering disease flare against COVID-19 infection. She improved very well with withdrawal and adding the antiviral as well as the increase of steroids. Unfortunately, she again was admitted to us with after about 4 to 5 days of discharge with nausea and vomiting. Now we considered a second infection which was possible, suspected to be bacterial. However, we were not able to identify the source of the infection with all her cultures being negative. She responded very well to meropenem for about 5 days. And then now we reinitiated her DMRs with tacrolimus 0.5 milligrams twice a day. With that, she has improved. And these were her investigations when she came the second time. Here, we also noted that she had hyperferritinemia along with raised inflammatory parameters with a higher WBC count. So we wanted to cover both the bases when it could be a disease flare as well as immediately having a second bacterial infection, considering her procalcitonin being 1.2. With that, the patient has improved and has been discharged. This was her X-ray with the latest admission, which definitely shows improvement as compared to the second one where we had to go ahead with the HRCT. With that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you.
This is a very interesting case, Dr. Prakriti, which has been followed up with you for more than a year.
Thank you.
Any differential diagnosis would you like to consider when she was seen for the first time? I was just thinking aloud, if I can just think aloud, whether a possibility of adult onset Still's disease could have been considered at that time. And the second one being ANA negative lupus.
Yes, ma'am. Her complement levels at that time were normal. And apart from, as well, her ANA profile, like we mentioned, it was negative. From the hyperferritinemia and hypertriglyceridemia, she had a rash again, which was there prior to presentation to us, but was not noted when she was being evaluated at our center. There was, at that point of time, we did not consider lupus, more so because the complements were normal. And only mild involvement of, there was just cytopenias and mild hepatosplenomegaly. And other reports were against going in favor of HLH as against SL.
Thank you. Any other questions, sir? Dr. Mahendranath?
I don't see anything here. Is anyone asked? No.
Let me see, sir. Somebody has asked, should we do HHV8 titers for multicentric Castleman's disease? And should we have done serum and urine protein electrophoresis to rule out MGUS?
HHV8 was done outside. Before she presented to us, it was negative. And I did share the serum protein electrophoresis, which was polyclonal gamma globulinemia with low albumin. Both were considered.
Anyway, therapeutically, she's on safe grounds. She's getting the immunosuppression which she needs. And fortunately, the immunosuppressants which has been chosen is got a wide spectrum of coverage. So hope she should do well. All the best for her.
Thank you.
Shall we move on to the next case?
Yeah, sure, please.